Have you ever felt your very presence questioned simply because of who you are? Imagine settling into your first-class seat, ready to work on the deal of a lifetime, when a fellow passenger leans across the aisle and whispers that she feels unsafe sitting next to you. What would you do when the only voices in the cabin are those judging you, and the flight attendants seem powerless to help Dr. Mariah Coleman, a poised and brilliant CEO on her way to a crucial investor meeting, faced exactly that moment of silent prejudice at 36,000 feet? Instead of shrinking back, she made a choice that no one saw coming, but could anyone have predicted the consequences below the radar? How far would you go to protect your dignity? And what happens when a single bold act ignites a firestorm that reaches boardrooms and beyond? Stay tuned as we unpack a story of quiet courage, corporate reckonings, and the true cost of bias. If you're ready for a journey that challenges convention and celebrates integrity, hit like, share this video, and subscribe. Now you won't want to miss what comes next. It was just after 6 Wandroa when Dr. Mariah Coleman stepped into the quiet glow of Terminal C at O'Hare International Airport. The sky outside was a soft, bruised purple, not yet fully awake. Mariah, too, was somewhere between alert and exhausted, balancing the weight of her carry-on with one hand and her thoughts with the other. She had always loved airports in the early morning, before the rush, before the noise. There was something sacred about the hush between departures. But today, even that hush felt fragile, like the silence before a cello string breaks. Mariah was scheduled to take United Flight 2263 to Boston. It was a 2-hour jump across the country. Not a long flight, but a meaningful one, at 11:00 a.m. The next day, she would be sitting across from 6 men in suits. 6 men who held the power to change the future of her company with a single word: yes or no. She had rehearsed her pitch countless times. She could speak about educational equity in her sleep. She could quote the literacy gap between low-income zip codes and tech corridors down to the decimal. Her slides were clean. Her numbers were honest. Her ideas were big. Still, her stomach churned. Because when you're a black woman asking for $100 million from a room full of legacy capital, you don't get to stumble. You don't get second chances. You have to be brilliant and calm and tireless. You have to smile while lifting a boulder. At gate C-17, she sat near the window, her navy blue blazer perfectly creased, the heel of one pump tapping gently beneath her. In her lap was her leather folio, filled with documents she didn't need to look at anymore. She opened it anyway. Sometimes the ritual calmed her. She caught a glimpse of herself in the reflection of the glass sharp cheekbones, warm brown eyes, and her locks pulled into a low, elegant bun. She looked the part, not just of a CEO, but of someone who had learned how to survive in rooms never built for her. Behind her, a family with toddlers was attempting to wrestle Cheerios out of a zipped backpack. A man 2 seats down was already on a call, speaking too loudly. Mariah tuned them out. She always could. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus Green. "Marcus, good luck today. Superstar. You're gonna make history." She smiled. Marcus had been with her since the beginning. He believed in the vision when it was nothing but a napkin sketch and a wild sense of duty. "Mariah, thanks. I'm tired, but ready. Marcus. Remember, it's not just tech, it's justice." She typed 3 dots, then paused, then deleted them. The boarding announcement came just as the light outside turned gold. First-class passengers were invited to board. Mariah stood, adjusted her blazer, and moved toward the jet bridge. Her boarding pass read Seat 2A. The plane was a 787 Dreamliner. Inside, the Polaris cabin gleamed with soft blue lighting, like a promise of peace. She settled into her seat, grateful for the wide leather pod, the quiet, the momentary solitude. A flight attendant approached Carla. Her name tag read with a genuine smile. "Good morning, Dr. Coleman. Welcome aboard. Can I get you anything while we finish boarding? Just water, please. Room temp, if that's possible. You got it." Carla disappeared with the ease of someone who knew how to move through small spaces with grace. Mariah exhaled, sinking into the seat. She reached for her tablet, not to work, but to breathe. She opened a folder filled with photos, a classroom in Detroit, kids laughing, coding on old laptops, her company's pilot program. This was what mattered. She closed her eyes for a moment. The hum of the cabin filled her ears like white noise. Then she felt it. A shift. It was subtle. Just the tightening of shoulders, the faint sound of a sigh, the shuffle of designer flats across the carpet. Mariah opened her eyes. A woman was standing in the aisle beside Seat 2B, diagonally across from her, late 50s, platinum blonde hair in a stiff bob, expensive sunglasses perched on her head. A cashmere shawl hung off her shoulders like it had better places to be. Behind her trailed a man gray suit, tired eyes, dragging 2 Louis Vuitton bags without enthusiasm. The woman took in the cabin, eyes sharp and surveying, like a guest inspecting a hotel room she didn't really want to be in. Her eyes landed on Mariah and paused. Just long enough. Mariah offered a polite nod, the standard kind. "I see you. Now let's mind our own business." But the woman didn't nod back. She adjusted her shawl, made a face one that could be read as indigestion, or discomfort, or distaste. Then she sat, her husband beside her. Mariah turned back to her tablet. But the air had already changed. Not heavy, not loud, but charged, like static on your skin before lightning. She pressed her earbuds in, started a calming playlist, tried to disappear, but part of her, some ancient instinct, knew this wouldn't be the end of it. And deep down, she was right. It started with the armrest, not even the whole thing, just the corner. Mariah hadn't noticed at first. She was lost in thought, scrolling slowly through the annotated notes Marcus had sent her on the investor deck. He'd flagged 2 slides with a single word tighter. She smiled to herself. Marcus was allergic to fluff. She respected that about him. Always had. But then she felt it just barely. The press of a lacquered nail against the soft leather of her shared armrest. A quick, polite, almost imperceptible tap. Mariah looked up. Elaine Bristow was leaning slightly across the aisle, her elbow hovering close to Mariah's personal space. Her lips were curved into a rehearsed smile, the kind reserved for suburban bake sales and HOA meetings. Friendly on the surface, brittle beneath. "Excuse me," Elaine said, voice low and sweet. "Are you sure you're in the correct seat?" Mariah blinked once, then pulled out one of her earbuds. "Pardon, your seat," Elaine repeated, gesturing lightly toward Mariah's space with a motion that could have passed as dainty, if it weren't so stiff. Sometimes they make mistakes with upgrades and such. The gate agents get flustered. I've had it happen before. There was nothing aggressive in her tone, nothing obviously rude, That was what made it so effective. Mariah responded evenly, without flinching. "This is 2A. That's what's printed on my ticket." She offered a brief smile. Not warm, not cold, just firm enough to say this conversation was now complete. Elaine tilted her head. "Well, I suppose they're trying to be more inclusive these days." Mariah held her gaze. A beat passed. Then another. The flight attendant, Carla, returned with Mariah's water. The glass trembled just slightly in her hand, as if she'd sensed the frost forming between the two women. "Everything all right?" Carla asked, eyes bouncing between them. "Yes," Mariah said, with a practiced calm. Elaine smiled again, this time toward Carla. "Oh, we're fine," she said. "I was just wondering if perhaps Dr. Coleman would be more comfortable sitting elsewhere. The seat configuration can feel a bit tight." Carla hesitated. There was something in the air now, something she didn't want to name. Mariah spoke before she could respond. "I'm quite comfortable. Thank you." Carla nodded quickly and turned to attend another passenger. Mariah returned her earbud to her ear, but her focus was gone. The document on her screen blurred slightly, and her chest tightened in the way it always had when a moment tipped into the realm of the familiar. It wasn't just about a seat. It never was. It was the way Elaine had said inclusive. The way she'd emphasized the word like it carried weight, like it required effort, like it was a burden. Mariah had heard it all before. In investor meetings when she was asked if her platform was too urban, in media interviews where they tried to categorize her leadership as inspirational instead of strategic, in pitch events where she was the only black woman in the room and was asked if she'd consider a more relatable spokesperson. She had armor for moments like this, but some days, armor isn't enough. She sipped her water slowly, trying to slow the spinning in her chest. 2 rows ahead, a businessman coughed. Across the aisle, a young couple passed a tablet back and forth, watching something funny. In the back of the cabin, the sound of luggage being stowed still echoed softly, and Elaine Bristow sat quietly, just out of reach, but not out of range. Her body turned just slightly away, her shawl now pulled close, like she needed protection from something, someone. Mariah wasn't a threat, but she knew what Elaine saw, not her resume, not her vision, not her years of work or the students her programs had reached or the team she'd built from nothing. Elaine saw a black woman in a first-class seat, and that, apparently, was enough. Mariah pulled her laptop from her bag, more for the motion than the purpose. She wasn't going to let this woman steal another second of her day. Not here, not before everything she had worked for came to a head. She clicked into her slide deck, reviewed the valuation breakdown again, ran through the projected outcomes for Series C, margin for error slim, confidence level high. Her company had already changed lives. Tomorrow could change everything else. Behind her, a flight attendant gave the standard safety announcement. Mariah listened with half an ear. Her body was in the seat, but her mind was orbiting elsewhere, running future simulations, planning responses, anticipating questions. She was halfway through adjusting her opening line when she noticed a flicker in her peripheral vision. Elaine. Again. This time, speaking to Carla. Low tones, a quick glance in Mariah's direction. Carla's smile faded, just slightly. Mariah tried to ignore it. Maybe it was nothing. But then she saw Carla's posture stiffen. Her eyes now darted nervously across the cabin. She was speaking to another flight attendant now, a man with silver hair and the crisp poise of a supervisor. He glanced toward Mariah once, then quickly turned back to Carla. Something was happening. Mariah's jaw tightened. She closed her laptop carefully, slowly. It was always like this, never loud, never blatant, just quiet, a whisper, a look, a question disguised as concern. She had faced it in so many forms over the years, from professors who were surprised by her thesis, from colleagues who couldn't believe her credentials, from donors who asked if she was the assistant at events she had organized. But this was different. This was a confined space at 38,000 feet, with eyes, with assumptions, with power. She took a deep breath, another. The announcement came through cabin doors closed, pushback starting, all electronic devices to airplane mode. Mariah complied automatically, but her hands were trembling. The man with silver hair approached her seat. He bent slightly, voice low. "Dr. Coleman, I'm David, the lead purser on today's flight. Everything all right with your seating experience?" Mariah raised an eyebrow. "Shouldn't that question be for the person asking you to move me?" David hesitated. "I understand there was a concern expressed regarding seating comfort. We're just doing our due diligence. Comfort. There it was again. That word." Mariah met his gaze directly. "Let me be absolutely clear. I am not moving from this seat. I paid for this seat, and I intend to sit here for the duration of the flight." "Is that a problem?" David straightened. "No, ma'am. No problem at all." He walked away, quickly. Mariah leaned back, closed her eyes. This wasn't over, not yet, but it was about to be, and not in the way they expected. Mariah sat back in her seat and tried to refocus on her presentation notes. She tapped through the slides of her tablet as the engine hummed beneath her. The memory of Elaine Bristow's gaze lingered like a frozen wind. It crept across her skin, lingering even after she pulled in her breath. She reminded herself that she had control over her reactions. She was here for a purpose. Carla Jennings walked past, offering a warm smile. Mariah returned it, noticing that Carla's hand trembled just slightly as she passed the beverage cart. The young flight attendant made her rounds with professionalism, but it was clear the air had changed. Mariah returned to her slides, studying the chart that showed how her company's literacy platform had raised reading scores by 30% in under 6 months. Marcus's notes on equity were scribbled in red ink at the margins. She practiced what she would say when she needed to drive home the human impact. It was a narrative she knew by heart, but her thoughts were interrupted once more. Elaine cleared her throat loudly. Everyone nearby turned to look. She spoke with a voice that attempted irritation but landed somewhere between petulance and entitlement. "Excuse me," she said, raising her voice just enough to be heard but not loud enough to trigger an announcement. "I feel like I cannot concentrate with you sitting next to me." Mariah's head snapped up. She pressed the tablet flat on her lap. She met Elaine's eyes directly without wariness or anger. "Is there something wrong with my presence?" she asked evenly. Elaine's lips curved in a tight smile. "It is hard to explain. I feel unsafe." Those 2 words echoed in Mariah's mind like a taunt. Unsafe. The claim was absurd in the cocoon of a luxury aircraft cabin, but Elaine had turned comfort into a weapon. She had weaponized her own discomfort. Mariah felt her pulse quicken. She fought to steady her breathing, to let logic take precedence over emotion. This was a moment she'd rehearsed again and again. Not the words, but the stance. She would speak clearly, firmly, without shrillness. "I am a ticketed passenger just like you," she said. "Seat 2A is mine. I paid for it. I will remain here." The cabin fell silent. A few heads craned over seats. Even the flight crew paused in their duties to watch. The man, 2 rows back, lowered his phone. The young couple across the aisle muted their show. The sound of the beverage cart grinding to a stop faded. Elaine's husband, Frank, cleared his throat, but his eyes stayed on the carpet. He did not meet Mariah's gaze. Mariah noticed he was wearing an expensive but slightly ill-fitting suit. He had the look of a man wishing he could shrink into his own skin. Carla emerged from the galley and approached the aisle. She looked from Elaine to Mariah. "I am so sorry," she began softly. "I will get the purser." Mariah nodded. She sank back into her seat and folded her hands on her lap. She felt the weight of every stare, the brilliance of her mind, the integrity of her vision. The years of work she had done to build her company seemed invisible to them all. They saw only a black woman they did not want beside them. She reflected on the countless times she had felt this way. In boardrooms, when silent disapproval became a wall between her and opportunities. In conferences, when strangers hesitated before praising her work. In interviews, when journalists asked if she had help writing her own proposals. But this was different. Here she was at 37,000 feet, entirely dependent on an airline to confirm her right to exist in that seat. The cognitive dissonance was suffocating. A soft chime sounded, and Captain Jorge Rivera's calm voice came overhead. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are aware of a seating issue. We will address it shortly. Please remain seated with your seat belts fastened." Mariah closed her eyes and breathed deep into her diaphragm. She allowed herself a private moment to feel anger and humiliation, to feel the injustice of being judged not by her character, but by the color of her skin. Then she shifted her focus outward. The flight attendants conferred in hushed tones near the front of the cabin. Elaine looked triumphant, like she had already won. But Mariah was no stranger to battles where the odds were stacked against her. She had learned that true power came from the disciplined use of privilege. And it was time to decide what she would do. Memories of her childhood flashed through her mind. Her mother reading to her in a small apartment in Detroit, showing her that words could be weapons of light or darkness. Her father teaching her that dignity was not given but earned. That every time she held her head high, she blazed a path for someone who followed. She felt a gentle tap on her shoulder. Carla stood there, face apologetic. "Dr. Coleman, the purser, would like to speak with you now." Mariah nodded and rose smoothly. Her training kicked in. Calm posture, clear voice, direct eye contact. David Wexler, the lead purser, stood in the aisle, adjusting his tie. He seemed conflicted. On one hand, he was duty-bound to enforce airline policy. On the other, he could sense the moral weight of this situation. "Dr. Coleman," he said, "I understand you are comfortable in your seat, but some concerns have been raised. Would you consider moving to another seat in first class? We would be happy to accommodate you." Mariah paused. This was the offer. A polite request wrapped in corporate kindness, but kindness without principle was a betrayal of her integrity. She steadied her voice to make it resonate through the hush of the cabin. "David," she said, "I appreciate your courtesy, but I must decline. I am in my rightful place. If you are unable to resolve this issue by keeping me in 2A, I will consider other options." David's brows shot up. "Other options," he whispered. Mariah inclined her head just enough for him to understand. She did not elaborate. She did not have to. He swallowed. "Very well." He turned to Elaine. "Ma'am," he said, "would you like to say anything?" Elaine rose as though on cue. "I paid for this seat. I will not move," she said. "I want that woman out of row 2. David's face went pale. He glanced at Mariah, then he looked down at his tablet. "I see. We will need to involve the captain." Captain Rivera appeared at the front of the cabin a moment later. He was tall and steady, years of experience written in the quiet lines at his eyes. "Dr. Coleman," he said, "we have a complaint that you have made someone feel unsafe." "Is that correct?" Mariah inhaled. "Yes," she said. "That is correct." Elaine Bristow indicated she felt unsafe sitting next to me. The word hung between them. Safe. Unsafe. The distinction was grotesque. He nodded. "Processing. Thank you." He turned to Elaine. "Ma'am, what is your request?" Elaine swallowed. She shook her head. She opened her mouth. She closed it again. Finally, she stammered. "I want her removed from the seat." Captain Rivera's gaze shifted to Mariah. "Dr. Coleman would not be leaving this seat without her consent," he said. "Understood. Life-saving and personal devices only." He added carefully, "We will proceed with departure." The captain stepped back. The cabin crew looked at each other in silent relief. Elaine sat down with a distressed huff. Mariah returned to her seat, heart pounding, mind racing. She powered on her tablet and replayed her opening slide in practice mode. The screen glowed. Her breath steadied. Carla caught her eye and offered a small nod of solidarity. Mariah nodded back. A moment passed as the engines roared to life. As the aircraft taxied toward the runway, Mariah realized that this fight had only just begun. But she also knew that she had asserted something far more important than a seat. She had asserted her inherent dignity. Elaine had won nothing. Mariah remained. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the wheels lifted off the ground. The hush returned to the cabin. But it was different now. It carried the promise of something greater than comfort. It carried possibility. Mariah adjusted her seatbelt, closed her eyes for a heartbeat, and thought about tomorrow. She would walk into that boardroom carrying more than slides and spreadsheets. She carried the weight of every person who had ever been told they did not belong. And she would not let them down. Mariah felt the Dreamliners climb more in her chest than in her ears. The cabin lights hummed softly overhead as the plane banked eastward. She reached for her tablet but paused, letting the moment's gravity settle. She had held her ground, asserted her right to her seat, and the cabin had fallen silent in recognition. Yet a deeper struggle was just beginning. Elaine Bristow sat to Mariah's right, fuming beneath a veneer of composure. Her husband, Frank, leaned forward, whispering urgently into her ear. Elaine's lips moved, but her eyes never left Mariah. They burned with wounded entitlement. Mariah closed her eyes and centered herself. She breathed in for a count of 4, held for a count of 4, and exhaled for a count of 6. She had learned this in moments of boardroom pressure. Scalpels of doubt pointed at her. The same technique now grounded her amid the turbulence of prejudice. A flight attendant slid past with a fruit plate. Carla offered Mariah a small, knowing smile and placed the dish on her side table. "Thank you," Mariah whispered. Carla's nod was fleeting but fierce, a quiet act of solidarity. Mariah picked up a strawberry and felt its cool juice at her fingertips. She thought of Marcus. Pacing his office after her text, "I did it." She paused before sending him another update. She didn't want to worry him. He would want to know she was okay. But she needed to process this first. She tapped her tablet back on and reviewed the agenda for tomorrow's meeting. 3 key talking points: impact metrics, growth strategy, and sustainability roadmap. She scrolled through graphs tinted in teal and coral. She practiced her opening line under her breath. "Good morning, and thank you all for being here. I'm Dr. Mariah Coleman, founder and CEO of ReadRise. As we've seen, literacy rates in communities under-resourced by the digital divide have improved by nearly 30%. Her voice felt strong, yet inside, a quiet question whispered, did she belong? Had this morning's confrontation weakened her authority before she even landed? Elaine coughed deliberately, a dry, staged sound. The cabin's hush shifted tautly in response. Then Elaine raised her phone, angling it toward Mariah. She glanced at the screen, tapped a few times, then locked eyes with Mariah. It was an invitation, a demand. Mariah felt exposed. She looked at Elaine, jaw clenched, and met her gaze, daring her to proceed. Elaine smirked and slipped her phone back into the pocket of her shawl. Later, as Mariah reached for her water, she overheard Elaine speak to Carla in a whisper so soft Mariah had to strain to hear. "I really do feel unsafe. I'm considering asking to deplane. It's just too unsettling." Elaine's words were not addressed to Mariah, but carried that implication all the same. Mariah's pulse thrummed. She set her glass down gently. The cockpit door's indicator light blinked closed, a reminder that the captain had final authority. A murmur of concern ran through the crew, visible in fleeting glances exchanged behind curt smiles. Carla approached Mariah's seat again, this time with a measured calm. "Dr. Coleman," she said quietly, "we want to ensure every guest's comfort. If at any time you'd like to move or if we can move you, please let me know." Mariah recognized the courtesy. She also recognized the consequence embedded in it. Courtesy flavored with expectation: move or be moved. She lifted her chin. "Thank you," she said, "but I will remain here." Carla bowed her head in understanding and stepped away. Mariah closed her eyes briefly, feeling a swell of emotion behind her ribs: pride, fear, defiance, exhaustion. She reminded herself she was a leader, not because she claimed it, but because others would follow. The cabin lights dimmed for the in-flight movie. A soft glow accentuated the empty seat beside Mariah, her silent ally in this confined battle. She leaned back and observed the scene unfold like a film. To her left, a passenger leafed through a magazine, pretending distraction. A few rows back, a young woman tucked her knees close, scanning the aisle nervously. Elaine's complaint had rippled through the cabin like a stone dropped into still water. The pattern of response was clear tension, curiosity, unease. Mariah's mind drifted to her childhood bedroom, where she had first discovered her love of stories. Her mother had read to her from old textbooks, and she'd fallen asleep dreaming of worlds beyond Detroit streets. She'd grown up believing that stories could be bridges or walls, sometimes both. This moment felt like a crucible. Her own story, her own presence, was the catalyst. She opened her eyes and took in the cabin's symmetry one more time. The mood had shifted, comfort invaded by questions of worthiness. Mariah decided to reclaim the narrative. She tapped her tablet and pulled up her company's impact video, real students talking about their progress. Real teachers lauding the platform, voices full of hope, resilience, triumph over obstacles. She pressed play. Soft audio filled her A2 pod. She watched faces on screen, young girls reading aloud, teenage boys solving problems, families celebrating milestones. Elaine's clipped ever so slightly at the sound, but stayed in her seat. Mariah felt her own chest expand with purpose. She realized she didn't need to confront Elaine directly. She needed to confront the idea that she belonged, and she would do that by letting her work speak. As the video played, Mariah closed her eyes and allowed herself a moment of calm. She felt genuine excitement for tomorrow's meeting, the possibility of scaling this impact. She felt gratitude for Carla, who had quietly supported her. She felt resolved to continue not just for herself, but for every young reader depending on her platform. Elaine's murmur reached her again. If they don't do something, I swear I'll miss my connecting flight. She didn't say it to Mariah, but everyone heard it. Mariah opened her eyes. The video ended. The cabin lights brightened slightly. The screen returned to the flight map. Carla returned, and this time she spoke openly. Dr. Coleman, I have to ask, is there anything more we can do to ensure your comfort? Mariah appreciated the genuine concern. This was not about etiquette. It was about unwritten rules policing her presence. She sat upright. I appreciate that. Carla, but nothing will make me feel more comfortable than being treated like any other paying passenger. She paused. I trust you know what to do. Carla nodded, tears glistening unexpectedly. I do, ma'am. Thank you. As Carla moved on, Mariah exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She powered off the video feed, turned to her tablet, and opened her notes. She rehearsed a new line in a moment of discomfort. Some might leave. I chose to stay, because the work is bigger than any one of us. She typed it out, but then deleted it. It belonged to tomorrow's room, not this cabin, here. All that mattered was her quiet refusal to retreat. Elaine glared at her again, as if searching for cracks. Mariah offered nothing. No glance, no flinch, just the calm steel in her eyes. The captain's voice came softly over the speaker. We've reached cruising altitude. Thank you for your patience. We will begin beverage service shortly. Beverage service. A small gesture, yet today it carried weight. It signaled routine, normalcy, possibility. Carla returned with a tray of drinks. She set a glass of sparkling water before Elaine, who practically recoiled. She set a glass of herbal tea before Mariah. Thank you. Carla. Mariah said sincerely. Carla smiled and moved on. Mariah took the tea, feeling its warmth seep through her fingers. She remembered a proverb her grandmother used to say, when you pour a cup of tea for someone else, you give them peace. Today, she felt that gift in reverse. As the flight settled into its rhythm, Mariah closed her eyes and envisioned tomorrow's room. She saw the faces of investors, the ebb and flow of their questions, the final signature line on the contract. She saw her company's future closing a gap that had once felt insurmountable. For now, she was still in Polaris Row 2A. She was still on United Flight 2263, and no one could claim she didn't belong. Mariah once again opened her tablet, intending to review her speaking notes, but her fingers froze over the screen. She felt the full weight of the cabin's gaze upon her. The drone of the engines seemed distant now, replaced by the hum of tension. She took a slow sip of her herbal tea as she considered her next move. The morning's confrontation had been exhausting, but it had also revealed a larger truth. This moment was not about vindication. It was about choice. Ahead in the aisle, Elaine and Frank Bristow whispered urgently between themselves. Frank's posture was stiff with unease. Elaine's eyes darted around, searching for an ally. Mariah watched them for a moment, then turned her attention back to Carla Jennings, who was returning with the beverage cart. Carla offered a gentle smile and set down a small packet of mixed nuts on Mariah's side table. She glanced at Mariah, and in that brief exchange conveyed her own frustration with what was happening. Mariah nodded in gratitude and then allowed herself a private moment to feel everything at once: anger, indignation, resolve, and compassion. When the cart moved on, Mariah leaned forward. It was time to break the silence. She tapped the call button. Carla arrived promptly, remaining at a discreet distance. "Dr. Coleman," she said quietly. "Yes," Mariah replied. "Would you like anything else?" she asked. Mariah paused, choosing her words. "Thank you," she said. "I'd like to speak with the purser again, please." Carla hesitated as if she understood the gravity of Mariah's request, but nodded and retreated. A few moments later, the lead purser, David Wexler, returned, his expression hesitant and professional. "Dr. Coleman," he said, "how can I assist you further?" Mariah met his eyes with calm clarity. "David," she said, "I appreciate the efforts to resolve this matter, but I believe we have reached the limits of courtesy. It seems a formal complaint has been filed against me. I am prepared to sit here quietly and let any further steps take their course. However, I would like to offer a solution of my own." David blinked. A solution. He cocked his head as if to ask what she meant. Mariah continued, "I would like to purchase every remaining seat in this first-class cabin," she said. "The cabin has 16 seats. 2 are occupied by Elaine and Frank Bristow. If I may buy the other 14, the cabin will become a private space. It will allow me to work, and it will address Mrs. Bristow's stated feeling of discomfort." The words hung in the air. David's mouth opened and closed as he processed the offer. Elaine's eyes widened, and Frank stiffened in his seat. Car seats beside Mariah leaned forward. Even the man with the magazine in row 4 turned his head. Mariah sat back in her seat, maintaining perfect composure. David cleared his throat. "That is an unusual request," he said. "Very unusual. Are you sure you wish to do that?" Mariah nodded. "I am." She produced her sleek black charge card from her purse and placed it on the side table. "American Express Centurion, the one that speaks a language of wealth few understand, but none can refute." David took a step back. "I will need to contact the captain and ground control," he said, "but if you're serious, we will attempt to facilitate. As a courtesy, I will inform Mrs. Bristow that you have made this offer. She may reconsider her request." Mariah gave a small nod and closed her eyes for a moment, imagining the cabin emptied of everyone but herself. When she opened her eyes, Elaine was staring at Mariah with a mixture of disbelief and fury. There was no turning back now. Mariah felt her heart pound, but her face remained serene. She reflected on her own past. Times when a gesture of power had been necessary to break through barriers. When words alone had not sufficed, this was one of those moments. A soft chime sounded as Captain Jorge Rivera's voice came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We have been notified of a special request by one of our first-class guests. We are working on logistics to accommodate. Please remain seated until we advise further. We appreciate your patience." The cabin remained hushed as if time itself had paused. Mariah closed her eyes and inhaled deep. The flight attendants conferred quietly near the galley. Elaine whispered to her husband, but Frank's expression was blank. The tension crackled like static electricity. Carla returned and knelt beside Mariah's seat. "Dr. Coleman," she said softly, "the airline is prepared to honor your request. They will offer compensation and alternate seats to all affected passengers. Once arrangements are made, you will hold exclusive occupancy of Polaris cabin." Mariah offered a small smile. "Thank you," she said simply. Carla rose and moved down the aisle. Mariah watched her go, then turned her attention back to Elaine. Elaine sat rigid, assessing Mariah as though seeing her for the first time. The Bristows would soon be relocated. They would face a choice and consequences. Mariah cared little for their fate, but she recognized the power of example. 10 minutes later, David returned. "Dr. Coleman," he said, "we have compensation packages prepared. A full refund of first-class fare plus $2,500 travel voucher. Plus rebooking an economy. Plus for this flight. And of course the seats will be vacated. Will you confirm and I will proceed?" Mariah leaned forward and picked up her card. "Yes," she said. "Please proceed." David took the card and offered an apologetic nod. "Thank you." He turned and began the process on his tablet. Mariah sank back and allowed herself a quiet moment to absorb. This was more than a purchase. It was a statement. A gentle commotion spread as flight attendants approached each first-class passenger, informing them of the situation. Most reacted with stunned gratitude, immediately accepting the offer. Some wept quietly at the unexpected gift. A few business travelers grumbled but softened when they realized the trust and generosity involved. Carla returned once more. "Dr. Coleman, all passengers have accepted or been processed. The cabin is officially yours," she said. Mariah nodded. "Thank you, Carla." She sipped her tea, feeling its warmth. She allowed herself a soft exhale. Polaris cabin was now her private office. Elaine and Frank were escorted past the curtain dividing classes. Mariah did not watch them go, but she felt their absence echo like a final gasp of prejudice leaving the room. For a moment, she closed her eyes and savored the stillness. The cabin seemed to breathe with relief. Mariah pulled her laptop onto the empty seat beside her. She opened her deck and began rehearsing silently. Her voice in her mind sounded clear, confident, compassionate. She envisioned the investors across the table tomorrow. She saw their faces lighting up at the impact metrics. She saw them nod with understanding. Still, there was a question that lingered in her mind. She laid her hands on the keyboard without typing and let it surface. Was wealth the only way to assert dignity in a world that equates power with money? She closed her eyes and considered. Money was a tool, but not a solution. Solutions came from change in mindset, policy, education, culture. She tapped the tablet and returned to her slides. She adjusted a title slide from Vision and Values to Vision, Equity, and Values. She added a quote from her mother. "Dignity is not for sale. It is a birthright." That would be her silent reminder as she worked. The Dreamliner leveled off at cruising altitude. The cabin lights dimmed to reading mode. Mariah set the brightness of her laptop to low and began typing. She drafted an email to Marcus. "I did it," she wrote. "Cabin is mine. Working." She paused, then added smiley face emoji. She hesitated before hitting send. This was a moment of triumph and solitude. She deleted the emoji and pressed send. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. Marcus replied, "You are my hero, also insane. I love you." Mariah allowed herself a small smile. She set the phone aside and returned to her work. The rest of the flight would be quiet, productive, mine. She glanced up at the empty pods around her and remembered the faces of the students she had seen in her impact video. Their trust had carried her here. Their futures depended on this pitch. She would not squander that responsibility. As the snow-capped ridges of Vermont slid beneath the wing on their descent, she closed her laptop and prepared for the next chapter. The cabin had been her battlefield. She had won the skirmish. Tomorrow she would stand in the boardroom and fight for a larger victory. And she would not retreat. The cabin lights dimmed to night mode as the flight settled into its routine. In Mariah's private Polaris space, the muted hum of air conditioning felt like a soft embrace. She leaned back, surveying the empty leather pods that stretched ahead and behind her. Each seat represented a story, a person whose plans had been disrupted, a journey rerouted for the sake of her dignity. She closed her eyes and allowed herself a moment of reflection, but the silence did not last long. A quiet ripple began at the front of the cabin. The curtains rattled slightly as two flight attendants and the lead purser moved past, whispering among themselves. Mariah sensed the shift and opened her eyes. She tapped lightly on her laptop to bring up her deck, but paused as she noticed Elaine and Frank Bristow walking down the aisle toward the back of the plane. They carried empty eyes and tight shoulders. Elaine's cashmere shawl seemed wilted. Frank's tie was slightly askew. Mariah felt a flicker of something like regret. Then she remembered that dignity is not about comfort for the oppressor. She returned her attention to her tablet and typed a brief note for herself. "Tomorrow I stand for my people." She underlined it. She had learned early on that private affirmations hardened resolve in public arenas. A soft chime sounded as Jade Morales' tweet pinged on Mariah's phone. She glanced at the screen. The tweet read, "She bought first class to buy her peace." A short video clip accompanied it showing Elaine's initial complaint, followed by Mariah offering to purchase the cabin. The clip had already amassed thousands of views. Mariah sat up. She tapped the share icon and forwarded the tweet to Marcus with a simple note trending. He would be thrilled and a little incredulous. Her phone buzzed again. Marcus had replied, "Are you kidding me? She is going viral. Proud of you." "It feels surreal." Mariah typed back, "Thanks, but now I have to stay focused." She set the phone aside and returned to her notes. She rehearsed the phrasing for tomorrow's boardroom work. Impact is not charity. Impact is justice. Impact is profit aligned with purpose. She repeated it until the words felt like armor. Suddenly, the cabin lights brightened briefly, indicating a service announcement. Captain Rivera's calm tone filled the speakers. "Once again, we apologize for the delay. We have accommodated our passengers and will be wheels up shortly. Thank you for your patience." Mariah inhaled and exhaled slowly, letting the captain's assurance settle her nerves. Carla Jennings approached with her service trolley. She offered Mariah a bottle of still water and a genuine smile. "Thank you, Carla," Mariah said sincerely. Carla lingered as though she wanted to speak, but then stepped away. Her solidarity was quiet but unmistakable. After Carla passed, Mariah's thoughts drifted back to the ripple effects of her decision. She recalled the faces of those first-class passengers as they accepted the compensation packages. The businessman who had grumbled then smiled when Mariah's airline voucher doubled his expectations. The young couple, who had insisted they would rather stay than leave, then accepted the offer when Mariah personally assured them that privacy mattered too. The aging professor, who tears in his eyes, confessed he had never felt such kindness at 37,000 feet. Their gratitude had filled her with something unexpected: warmth, connection, proof that one person's insistence on respect could reverberate far beyond a single cabin. Yet there was another layer unfolding. Everyone with a smartphone or a social media account had begun to weigh in. Some praised her as a modern hero of justice. Others questioned the need for such a dramatic gesture. Many debated whether money should be used to solve injustice. The conversation had exploded. Mariah scrolled through the comments under Jade Morales' post. Admirers called her a leader, a visionary, a rock star. Critics labeled her entitled and questioned her priorities. She winced at a few harsh words, but recognized that any meaningful action would invite both applause and scrutiny. She closed the app and tapped her tablet back on. The slide, titled Financial Projections, beckoned. She would need to show investors that this morning's extraordinary act was not just symbolic. It was a demonstration of her company's ability to deploy resources strategically and ethically. As she reviewed the numbers, she sensed movement behind her. She turned and saw Frank Bristow standing in the aisle. His face was pale. He cleared his throat. "Dr. Coleman," he said quietly, "may I have a word?" Mariah paused. This was unexpected. She closed her laptop and gestured to the empty aisle. "Please." Frank stepped forward, hesitated, then spoke. "Have you lost your mind?" he asked. "You just bought a whole cabin despite a complaint." His voice was low and ragged. Mariah met his gaze calmly. "No," she said. "I bought it to protect my peace and my dignity." Frank frowned. "Isn't that the same thing?" she stammered. "Elaine told me I was uncomfortable and suddenly the entire flight stopped because of me." So said. Elaine's entitlement had caused this. He continued. "But you took it further." Mariah leaned back against her seat. "I took it where it needed to go," she said softly. "Sometimes a single act of power rebalances a system. You can call it drama. I call it equity." Frank seemed to swallow something. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I understand equity in theory," he said, "but in practice you have enormous resources. Most people don't. That's not a fair fight." Mariah's chest tightened. Indeed, her privilege came from years of work and risk, but the privilege to claim one's rightful place should not be limited to any one person, she thought. "I know it wasn't fair, Frank," she said gently. "It wasn't about me alone. It was about everyone who has ever been told they do not belong." Frank's expression softened. He looked toward the curtain dividing first class and economy. Then, back at Mariah, he hesitated and spoke again. "I'm sorry about how my wife behaved." He said, "That should not have happened." Mariah nodded and studied his remorseful face. "Thank you," she replied. He turned and walked away, leaving Mariah with her thoughts and her empty cabin. She took a deep breath to steady herself. The flight was nearly halfway complete. In an hour, she would begin her descent into Boston. She closed her eyes and let herself feel gratitude for the unexpected conversation. Even Frank's apology, though small, acknowledged the humanity behind her action. Mariah reopened her tablet and drafted a brief memo to her team at Redrise. Subject: Morning of Action. update cabin purchased crew exceptional service media coverage, skyrocketing investor meeting, recalibrated to include social impact highlight. She listed bullet points, summary, concise, actionable items. As she typed, her phone buzzed again, this time with a news alert from a major business publication. Headline read, Tech CEO Gambles Fortune to Defend Dignity on Flight. Subhead declared her unprecedented gesture sparks debate on race, wealth, and respect. Mariah allowed herself a small smile. She had not sought headlines, but headlines had found her. She sent the memo and then leaned back to reflect. The ripple was growing. Conversations about race privilege and executive responsibility filled her timeline. Some challenged her choices. Others defended them. But everyone was talking. A young couple boarded the cabin, returned to first-class service, offering them snacks and drinks. One of them asked Carla if the airline often accommodated requests like this. Carla smiled wryly and shook her head. No, she said, not often. But today had been different. Mariah watched Carla move on and felt a renewed respect for the crew. They had navigated policy empathy and logistics under intense scrutiny. They had upheld her dignity without permission. She closed her laptop and rose. The seatbelt sign still off, she walked to the galley and spoke softly to Carla. Thank you again for everything. Carla turned and looked at her. Surviving this together, she said lightly. Carla smiled and nodded. Mariah returned to her seat and allowed herself one more moment of calm. She closed her eyes and imagined tomorrow's boardroom. She pictured herself walking to the table with confidence, purpose, and the quiet conviction of someone whose integrity had already been tested at altitude. The Dreamliner hummed on above the clouds. Below lay a patchwork of forests, lakes, and highways. Soon, Boston would appear on the horizon. Mariah felt the wing slice through dusk light and thought, this is only the beginning. Mariah sank back into her seat. The empty rows of Polaris cabins stretching ahead and behind her like a silent gallery. The hush that followed the Bristow's departure was profound. Their footsteps had carried away more than two people. They'd swept out a barrier. Now, wrapped in solitude and the soft glow of overhead lights, Mariah was alone in a realm she'd only briefly imagined an entire cabin, hers to steward. She exhaled and placed her hands on her lap. In that quiet, she felt a surge of emotion, relief, vindication, fatigue, and, unexpectedly, loneliness. She realized that victory sometimes felt hollow without someone to share it with. Yet this private space also offered new clarity. Mariah pulled her laptop toward her and reviewed her boardroom opening. She typed a fresh line. Inclusion is not a favor. It is a fundamental right. She stared at the words, then adjusted the phrasing to, inclusion is not a favor. It is the foundation of progress. Satisfied. She saved the slide. Carla Jennings appeared at the aisle, pushing a service cart laden with snacks and beverages. Mariah offered a soft smile. Is there anything you need from me? Carla asked. No, you have been incredible, Carla. Thank you, Mariah replied. Carla stepped forward and gently arranged a small bowl of mixed berries at Mariah's side table. She then hesitated and added, Your courage gave us purpose today. Thank you again. Mariah nodded, moved by Carla's sincerity. That meant more than words could say. Once Carla departed, Mariah gazed around her domain. The seats gleamed in pristine condition, untouched by other passengers. She imagined writing her pitch from this sanctuary. She could spread documents, sketch diagrams, record voice notes without interruption. It was an opportunity few ever experienced. She promised herself to make the most of it. She opened a new document and began drafting an email to Omnibridge Ventures, the firm she would meet in Boston, subject to tomorrow's meeting beyond numbers. In the body she wrote, "I look forward to discussing how ReadRise can deliver both returns and impact. But first, let me ask, how will we quantify dignity in our success metrics?" She paused and considered the phrasing. It was bold. It was a challenge. She kept it. Her phone rang softly. She glanced at the screen. Jade Morales, the blogger, had called. Mariah hesitated, then answered. "Hello, Jade. This is Mariah." Voice calm, yet warm. "Hi, Mariah," Jade said. "I promise this will be brief. I wanted to offer you a chance to tell your story in your own words. There's an interview spot on my platform if you're interested." Mariah's heart lifted. That invitation was both validation and platform. She replied, "Thank you, Jade. I'd love to. Let's schedule it when I return." Jade agreed and said she'd send details. Mariah hung up feeling a flicker of excitement. As she returned to her laptop, she realized her stomach was empty. The morning's tea and berries had kept her going, but she needed real food. She pressed her call button. Carla appeared within seconds. "Would you like anything for lunch?" she asked. Mariah thought of the menu tray card, a grilled chicken salad, maybe, or a heartier entree. "I'd love the grilled chicken salad and a sparkling water." "Thank you, Carla," Mariah replied. "Consider it done," Carla said as she retreated. Mariah closed her eyes briefly, savoring the moment. This cabin was an anomaly, an artifact of protest, a symbol of empowerment. It held her triumph and her solitude. She permitted herself a private thought. This is my cabin, but it is also my responsibility. She opened her laptop and navigated to her company's learning dashboard. She reviewed the latest student progress graphs. They showed rising engagement. A minor bug in the reading assessment module had been fixed. She jotted a note to follow up with the engineering team. Her startup thrummed even at 37,000 feet. A ping from her inbox alerted her to a forwarded message from Omnibridge's assistant, confirmation of meeting time and location. Tomorrow's meeting was set for 11 a.m. sharp at their Boston office. The address, directions, parking instructions, everything was meticulously detailed. She printed the email to PDF in her tablet files, then closed the app. A pang of anxiety rose in her chest. She closed her eyes and placed a hand on her heart. She thought of her mother's advice. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the determination that something else is more important. She repeated it like a mantra, then opened her eyes. She was ready. Mariah stood and stretched. She walked to the front of the cabin, paused at the curtain dividing first and economy class. She looked beyond it at the sea of seats and passengers, each on their own journey. Some still whispered about the drama. Others hunched over tablets or slept. She felt gratitude for every person who had been moved, relocated, inconvenienced, or enlightened by her decision. The world shifted when one person altered the status quo. She returned to her seat and noticed Elaine and Frank Bristow's absence had created a gap. They had been the pivot point. She now occupied space they rejected. The symbolism was potent. She admired how gravity held a weight but also pivoted the balance when challenged. She marveled at her own resolve to leverage privilege for purpose. The lunch arrived exactly 7 minutes later. Carla emerged with a small tray, the grilled chicken salad, sparkling water in a crystal glass, a warm bread roll with butter. Carla handed her the tray. "Here you go, ma'am. I hope it's to your liking." Mariah smiled. "It is. Thank you." Carla paused. "Dr. Coleman," she said quietly, "if there is ever anything I can do, anything at all, please let me know." Mariah felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you, Carla. You already have. You already have." Mariah picked at her salad thoughtfully. She chewed a piece of lettuce and considered the cabin around her. It was silent, immaculate, hers. In that silence, she heard her own heartbeat. She realized that privacy was a luxury she rarely allowed herself. This solitude, though imposed by injustice, was also a gift of reflection. She allowed herself to consider how she might harness it. She opened her notes app and jotted 3 bullet points. Led with empathy, quantify dignity, translate equity into action. She tapped each line into place. Empathy for everyone involved, dignity measured by inclusion metrics, action defined by policy changes and platform improvements. She organized these thoughts for tomorrow's slide deck. As she worked, she heard the soft murmur of a child's laughter from the cabin beyond the curtain, a mother's soothing voice, the lullabies of ordinary travel. Mariah realized how rare it was to be remembered as an ally in someone's comfort, how healing a simple gesture could be. She closed her laptop and leaned back. The wings of the Dreamliner cut through wisps of cloud. The sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in soft amber and rose. The cabin lights took on a gentle glow. Mariah took a deep breath, savoring the vista through the window. Tomorrow would be a different battlefield, one of boardroom politics and power balances. But tonight she had a cabin of her own, a sanctuary where dignity was not negotiated, where she could prepare, reflect, and simply be. She tapped her phone with a single thought. Cabin secured, heart full, ready. She hit send. Her phone buzzed seconds later with a reply from Marcus. "I envy you. Rest well. You've earned it." Mariah silenced the device. She closed her eyes. She allowed herself one small smile. The cabin was hers, momentarily, but more importantly, her purpose was clearer than ever. She reached for her tea, drained its warmth, and placed the cup gently on the side table. Then she lay back, closing her eyes for a brief rest. Her final thought as she drifted toward calm was, "This is what justice feels like." The dividing curtain swayed gently as the economy cabin's ambient noise spilled into Polaris. Mariah sat in her private enclave, the aftermath of her bold act settling around her like a hush. She watched through the small window in the curtain as 2 figures emerged from the glow of her former domain. Elaine and Frank Bristow shuffled down the aisle, their polished appearance belied by hunched shoulders and downcast eyes. Elaine's cashmere shawl now hung awkwardly on her frame, its pristine edges creased. Frank's expression was blank, as though shock had hollowed out his defenses. They avoided eye contact with every passenger they passed. It was their silent acknowledgement of defeat. Mariah felt no triumph in their departure. She leaned forward and rested her arms on the armrests, watching them move farther away. In that moment, she understood something profound. Shame was a heavy burden. It could crush a person. But shame also cleared the air, exposing ugliness that thrived in silence. Carla Jennings appeared at Mariah's side. She hesitated for a moment, then whispered, "Thank you, Dr. Coleman." Mariah nodded, her throat tight. They both understood that this was about more than seats. It was about respect. Mariah closed her eyes and let herself feel the weight of everything: the stares, the whispered rumors, the courage it had taken to transform discomfort into action. Her heart pounded with empathy for the Bristowes as they disappeared behind the curtain. They would face judgment from the entire cabin now. Their departure was a public reckoning. The purser, David Wexler, joined Mariah at her seat. His tone was respectful yet uneasy. "Dr. Coleman," he said, "everything has been handled. Mrs. Bristow and Mr. Bristow have been escorted to economy. Compensation packages have been issued. Are you comfortable now?" Mariah opened her eyes and studied his face. He had done what was necessary, yet seemed burdened by it. "Yes," she replied. "Thank you." He offered a slight bow and turned away. The cabin returned to its new normal. The empty pods gleamed in their solitude. Mariah inhaled slowly and let out a long exhale. She permitted herself a brief smile. This was her victory. But victory was only meaningful when it paved the way for something greater. She opened her laptop and watched her own reflection in the black screen. Mariah Coleman, a black woman who refused to shrink, who paid for her own peace. She typed in her notes, "dignity reclaimed." She tapped delete on the word reclaim, changing it to dignity upheld. That felt more precise. She practiced saying it under her breath. Dignity upheld. The words felt solid in her chest. Her thoughts drifted to tomorrow's boardroom. She would stand before investors who might never fully grasp the cost of prejudice. But she would carry this moment with her. She would show that integrity was non-negotiable. She would insist that equity was an essential part of any business equation. A soft chime sounded. Captain Jorge Rivera's voice came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now at cruising altitude. We have stabilized at 36,000 feet. You may now use personal electronic devices." Mariah tapped her tablet on and opened her annotated slide deck. She rehearsed aloud. "Our work is not just about profit. It is about progress. It is about people." She closed the deck and set it aside. The boardroom lines needed polishing, but her opening statement would remain. She would challenge them to measure success by human impact. She would challenge them to value dignity as much as dividends. Her stomach growled. She pressed her call button. Carla appeared almost immediately. The grilled chicken salad and sparkling water had vanished. "Would you care for something else, Doctor?" Coleman, Carla asked. "I could offer you the braised beef short rib or the chef's vegetarian pasta." Mariah considered. The pasta sounded comforting. "Yes," she said, "I'd love the pasta and another sparkling water." "Certainly," Carla replied and turned away. Left alone, Mariah glanced at the empty cabin. She felt a tingle of resolve. This was a turning point in her life and in her company's history. She would not let it fade into memory. She would transform it into momentum. Mariah's phone buzzed. A news alert scrolled across the screen. Global reaction erupts after CEO purchases first-class cabin to defend rights. Health tech innovator steals headlines. She tapped the article and read a few lines aloud. She turned injustice into an opportunity to demonstrate the power of ethical leadership. She turned a moment of prejudice into a masterclass of dignity. Mariah smiled and put the phone aside. This was not about headlines for her. It was about the ripple effect. Her thoughts shifted to the young students who used her platform. She pictured a classroom in Detroit, where a black girl hesitated before raising her hand. She pictured her now, hearing this story of Mariah Coleman and believing that she could occupy any space she chose. That belief was everything. Mariah closed her eyes and whispered into the quiet cabin, "This is for you." She opened her eyes and began typing an email to her team. Subject: Cabin of Dignity. Today, we faced a challenge on Flight 2263. I upheld my seat and our values. The cabin is now ours to steward. Please join me in channeling this moment into tomorrow's presentation. It's time to turn dignity into data. She paused, then clicked send. The cabin lights dimmed further as the sun slid below the horizon. Mariah leaned forward and reviewed her email one more time. It was concise, yet powerful. It captured the essence of what had happened. It would remind her team that their work was tethered to a higher purpose. Mariah's thoughts wandered to Frank Bristow's apology earlier. He had said, "I'm sorry about how my wife behaved." That apology had held both recognition and regret. It had an echo of hope in it. Change often began in moments of admission. She reflected on the cabin empty of judgment and filled with potential. She realized that this was a canvas, a chance to add a new chapter of inclusion. She drafted a new slide policy change proposal: how airlines can train crews to handle bias incidents, proactive measures to protect passenger dignity. She saved it under draft social impact. Her pasta arrived. The aroma of tomato and basil filled the air. Carla placed the plate before her with a soft smile. "Enjoying every bite is a form of self-care," Carla said quietly. Mariah's eyes glistened. "It's more than that," she replied. "It's an act of affirmation." Mariah ate slowly, savoring each forkful. The flavors grounded her. She took a sip of sparkling water between bites and reflected. In this cabin she had found not only solitude but clarity. She had seen the weight of prejudice and had proven that one person's action could shift the balance. After finishing, she closed her laptop and allowed herself to stretch. She walked to the curtain again and peered into the economy section. Families gathered around toddlers. Business travelers tapped away on laptops. A few snapped pictures on their phones, recording the silent monument of an empty first class. Mariah gave a small, private nod and returned to her seat. She reclined, set her tablet on standby, and closed her eyes. She remembered her mother's words. "You carry the future on your shoulders." She smiled. The weight felt lighter now. She had carried it well. As sleep beckoned, she whispered one last affirmation: "Dignity upheld." She drifted toward rest, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. Mariah woke briefly to the gentle chime of her phone. Cabin lights were dimmed for rest, but Polaris remained illuminated enough for her to check notifications. Dozens of messages flooded her screen. Her heart skipped a beat as she opened the notification panel. Jade Morales' interview request was first, but beneath it lay tweets, retweets, direct messages, and news alerts. She leaned forward, brushing sleep from her eyes. One tweet read, "Black CEO rewrites the rules at 36,000 feet. Over 10,000 likes and growing." Another post quoted a passenger. She literally bought the cabin to protect her space. That one had gone viral in minutes. Mariah scrolled through the comments. Admirers called her courageous, empowering, trailblazer. Critics questioned her motives, calling her the high-priced protester or denial of service on prejudice. Some debated the ethics of using wealth to solve social problems. She paused at a comment, "Money can't buy justice. It only highlights who can afford it." Her chest tightened. She tapped a reply beneath that comment, "Justice should never be a privilege reserved for wealth. It's everyone's right." She hesitated before hitting send. Then she reminded herself why she was here to use her resources responsibly. She tapped send. Another ping. A business news alert. Major outlets are picking up the story. Headlines vary from power move or publicity stunt to a lesson in dignity. Mariah felt a pang of doubt had she inadvertently become a spectacle. But then she remembered the faces of students who relied on her platform. They needed representation more than comfort. She swiped through Instagram stories and saw professional accounts sharing snippets of Elaine's complaint, followed by the Centurion card on display. She saw flight attendants praising her courage. She saw comments from executives praising her leadership. Each piece of content formed a mosaic of public reaction, some supportive, some skeptical, all engaged. At the bottom of her notifications was a DM from her co-founder, Marcus Green, literal legend. But now, focus on Boston. We need to turn this energy into action. He sent a quick summary of what to highlight in tomorrow's Deck Media Reach: social sentiment analysis, community engagement. Mariah reviewed the bullet points and made mental notes. She glanced toward the curtain that separated Polaris from economy. Thousands of eyes beyond that barrier had been drawn into her story. She wondered what they saw: a fearless entrepreneur, a wealthy woman flexing power, or a symbol of change, perhaps all three. Mariah tapped out a quick update to her team group chat. Morning, Team Viral on Flight 1263. Be prepared to integrate social metrics into tomorrow's presentation. Meeting prep at 8:00 a.m. in the lobby lounge. She paused before sending and added, "Thank you all for your support." Then she hit send. Her phone buzzed again with a LinkedIn message from a renowned VC, impressed by your leadership under pressure. Would love to discuss your vision for equitable edtech. Let's connect tomorrow afternoon. Mariah felt a thrill. She replied, "I'd be honored. Let's schedule a call." She added the message to her mental itinerary. All around her, the Dreamliner glided through a night sky sprinkled with stars. Below, lights from towns shimmered like fireflies. Mariah closed her eyes and inhaled the cool, recycled air. She reflected on how a single act on a flight had ignited conversations worldwide. She felt the weight of responsibility settle heavier than ever. In her mind, she played through tomorrow's boardroom. She would open with a brief acknowledgement of this morning's event. Today's headlines may have been written at 36,000 feet, but tomorrow's narrative will be built on our collective impact. She cleared her throat as if speaking aloud. She pictured investors leaning in, eyes curious, ready to hear about ROI woven with social justice. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. Dr. Coleman Carla's gentle tone registered in Mariah's awareness. "You're welcome to rest. We'll wake you 15 minutes prior to descent into Boston." "Thank you," Carla Mariah replied. She smiled, grateful once more for Carla's kindness. She slid her phone into her purse and lay back. The notifications could wait. For now. She allowed herself a few more moments of calm before sleep claimed her. She thought of the students who would wake tomorrow to news of her act. She hoped it sparkled in their dreams as proof that they belonged in rooms built for others. An hour later, the soft ding of the seatbelt sign woke her. She rubbed her eyes and sat up. The cabin lights had brightened for landing preparation. She gathered her tablet, phone, and notes. As she slipped her shoes back on, her thoughts drifted to how she would begin her final practice of tomorrow's presentation in the lobby lounge. She walked toward the curtain, pausing to look back at the empty cabin that had become her sanctuary. It was a space she had defended and claimed with dignity. Now it had been claimed by the world as a symbol. She allowed herself a moment of pride before stepping into the aisle toward the future. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of the Omnibridge Ventures office, illuminating a spacious boardroom polished to a mirror sheen. Mariah stepped inside, her posture erect, her expression calm. She clutched her leather portfolio close to her chest as she approached the long mahogany table. Around it sat 8 figures in tailored suits. She took Sat A1, the spot marked for the lead presenter. She exhaled, letting the cool air of the room steady her nerves. Across the table, a tall man with silver hair and an impeccable gray suit nodded in greeting. He was Martin Caldwell, the lead partner at Omnibridge. 2 seats down sat Elaine Bristow's husband, Frank. His appearance was unremarkable today, no sign of yesterday's disheveled suit or hollow eyes. He offered a curt smile that did not reach his eyes. Mariah settled in and laid out her laptop. Her notes, her confidence. Marcus Green sat beside her, a reassuring presence. She whispered, "Ready?" He gave a slight nod. Martin tapped a folder on the table. "Good morning, Dr. Coleman. Thank you for joining us. We have reviewed your preliminary materials and are eager to hear more. Please begin when you're ready." Mariah opened her laptop. The projection screen at the head of the room flickered into life with her title slide, "Read Rise, Empowering Readers, Equity, and Impact." She clicked forward. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present Read Rise's vision. Literacy is not merely the ability to decode words. It is the gateway to opportunity and empowerment." She felt the eyes on her, but maintained her rhythm. Today's headlines mentioned my cabin purchase on Flight 2263. I understand that decision sparked debate. I made that choice because dignity is foundational to learning. Without respect and inclusion, any educational tool falls short of its promise. In the silence that followed, Martin's brow lifted. He leaned back. "Yes, we read about that. Quite the statement," Mariah continued. "Indeed. But our work is also about sustained action. Let me share how Read Rise has improved reading scores by 35% in under 12 weeks using adaptive AI and community engagement programs." She clicked to her next slide. The room brightened with colorful graphs and smiling faces of children engaged in virtual classrooms. She guided them through impact metrics, retention rates, and projected growth. She spoke of partnerships with school districts and public libraries. She wove in quotes from teachers praising the platform and testimonials from parents. Halfway through the deck, she paused. Then she said, "I want to address a crucial question. How do we quantify dignity in the context of investment returns?" She advanced to a slide titled Dignity Metrics. Here we track user-reported engagement, comfort, and inclusion ratings. Every learner logs feedback on how respected and supported they feel. Those scores correlate directly with academic progress. Data does not lie. Frank shifted in his seat. He cleared his throat. "Dr. Coleman," he said, "if I may interject, your approach is admirable. But can you guarantee that these subjective metrics will hold up under scrutiny? Investors need predictable ROI, not emotional indicators." Mariah met his gaze evenly. "Thank you for the question, Mr. Bristow. That concern is valid. But our data shows that user comfort directly impacts retention. When learners feel excluded, they drop out. Inclusion drives engagement, which drives success. We have statistical models demonstrating these correlations with 94% confidence intervals." She clicked to another slide demonstrating the statistical analysis. Pillars of trust drive 20% of engagement metrics. Let me illustrate with a case study from our Detroit pilot. 10 students initially flagged low inclusion scores. We implemented targeted mentorship outreach. Within 2 weeks, their inclusion scores rose 40%. Their reading comprehension rose 22%. Mercy and dignity are not antithetical to returns. They enhance them. Martin nodded thoughtfully. He turned to Frank. "What do you think?" Frank cleared his throat. "I think Dr. Coleman has compelling data, but my concern is larger." He paused. The optics of yesterday's event cannot be divorced from this investment. Some of our limited partners will question associating with such a high-profile incident. Mariah felt the familiar tightening of her chest. She took a breath. "I understand the concern, but I would argue that the optics are precisely why we need this partnership. They signal a shift in corporate responsibility. They demonstrate leadership under pressure. They show that Redrise values principle over profit. That message resonates with a broader customer base. It creates brand loyalty. It drives subscription growth." She clicked to her next slide. Market projections for social impact-infused brands show 25% faster customer acquisition. Companies that embrace purpose see higher valuations. Redrise is positioned at that intersection of profit and progress. Martin leaned forward and steepled his fingers. "You paint an optimistic picture, but there is one final matter we must address." He turned to Frank Bristow. Frank nodded and spoke. "Dr. Coleman, I believe you were not aware that my wife was the passenger who filed the complaint that led to this entire scenario." Mariah's breath caught. "So, your wife was the one?" "Yes," he replied quietly. "Elaine cited discomfort and safety concerns. That escalated into your purchase." Mariah met his gaze with steady eyes. "Yes, that is correct." A hush fell. The partners exchanged glances. Mariah felt a surge of adrenaline. She had anticipated this moment. She had rehearsed her response. She would not flinch. She said calmly, "I believe it is important to confront uncomfortable truths. Subtle prejudice undermines inclusion. Had your wife not felt unsafe in my presence, I would not have had the opportunity to assert my rights." That incident sparked global conversation on race equity and executive leadership. It revealed needs that existed long before our flight. Martin spoke again. "It is rare to see a founder maintain such clarity under personal pressure. You navigated that situation with integrity and data. We respect that. However, we must consider whether such events will distract from our core objectives." Mariah nodded. Disruption is inevitable when confronting systemic bias, but stability grows from resolution. By addressing prejudice directly, we remove hidden barriers. We build stronger platforms. We drive deeper loyalty. She advanced to her final slide, investment terms. Redrise valuation, $150 million pre-money. Funding sought $25 million for platform expansion and community integration. Expected 5-year ROI, 24%. Timeline and milestones included. She clicked off the projector and closed her laptop. The room remained silent. Then Martin rose and clasped his hands. "This has been the most engaging presentation we've seen this quarter. You have convinced us that Redrise is not only financially viable but ethically essential. I'm pleased to say we will move forward with due diligence." Mariah allowed herself a small smile. Marcus sighed in relief beside her, Frank nodded and offered a genuine smile. Martin continued, "We will send term sheets by tomorrow morning. Congratulations, Dr. Coleman. Partnering with you aligns with our own vision of impact-driven investment." Mariah closed her eyes for a moment, gratitude welling within her. She opened them and replied, "Thank you. I look forward to building a future where dignity and data unite to empower every learner." As she gathered her things, the partners rose and extended hands. Martin stepped forward. "First, congratulations." Frank followed and offered a handshake. Mariah accepted both with grace. She felt the weight of yesterday's confrontation transform into the weight of today's opportunity. She exited the boardroom into a sunlit hallway. Camera flashes from her phone and selfies from staff echoed behind her. Reporters had waited, capturing the moment. She credited them with nods and smiles. Each camera click was a testament to how far this story had traveled. In the lobby, Marcus greeted her with a proud smile. "You were extraordinary," she whispered. "No," Mariah replied. "We were." He squeezed her hand. They turned toward the day ahead. Together, they walked into a new chapter, one defined by purpose, data, and dignity. Mariah woke in her hotel room to a soft glow of sunrise filtering through the blackout curtains. She lay still for a moment, feeling the weight of the past 48 hours settle in her bones. The memory of yesterday morning's confrontation on that United flight and the subsequent boardroom triumph in Boston danced at the edges of her mind. She rose and moved to the window, drawing the curtain aside to reveal a panorama of the city's skyline. Boston was waking up, its historic streets preparing for another day of ambition and change. She dressed in a charcoal gray sheath dress that conveyed authority without intimidation. In her hand, she carried the tablet on which she had rehearsed her presentation. Today, she would finalize media interviews, team debriefings, and her own reflections. But before she stepped out, she needed to address the most personal challenge she had yet faced. She sat at the small desk and opened her email. There, just above the overnight updates and congratulatory messages, was a message from Frank Bristow. The subject read, "A conversation." She hesitated before clicking it. His tone had shifted since yesterday. His apology had been sincere but tentative. Now, he wanted more. She opened the email, Mariah. "Thank you for your professionalism and courage. There is something I need to say that words alone may not express. I would appreciate a brief conversation in person today. If you're open to it, please let me know when and where." Frank Mariah's chest tightened. She considered ignoring it, but realized that this was an opportunity to model the kind of dialogue she championed. She replied, "Frank, I appreciate your sincerity and am open to a conversation. I will be in the lobby lounge between 10 OWURO and 10:30 a.m. Please come by then." Mariah. She hit send and closed her laptop. She paused, aware that she was about to navigate a space between accountability and reconciliation. The price of silence had always been high. Unchecked bias festered. Conflict buried itself until it resurfaced with greater force. She understood that engaging in this conversation carried risk, but silence carried more. She dressed quickly, tidied the room, and headed downstairs. The lobby lounge buzzed with morning energy. Business travelers sipped coffee. Reporters tapped on laptops. Her team had reserved a corner table. Marcus waved as he spotted her. He gave her a thumbs up. She smiled and sat. He set her a cup of black coffee and a small almond croissant. "Thank you," he said softly. "You look ready." "I feel ready," she replied. "I'm about to have a conversation I've been dreading but know is necessary." Marcus nodded and gave her a reassuring look. He turned to give her space and withdrew to a nearby table. Mariah took a deep breath and opened her notes app. She wrote keywords: empathy, clarity, boundaries, accountability, compassion. She reviewed them and closed the app. At 10:05 a.m., a tall figure approached. Frank Bristow stood a few feet away, looking composed but nervous. His suit was impeccable and his tie perfectly knotted. As he neared her table, he inhaled sharply and squared his shoulders before stepping forward. "Dr. Coleman," he said quietly. "May I join you?" "Please have a seat, Frank," she replied, gesturing to the chair across from her. He sat and folded his hands on the table. They both ordered fresh coffee. For Mariah, it was chamomile tea. They waited in silence until the server departed. Frank exhaled. "I wanted to thank you again for the conversation in the cabin," he began, "and more so for your grace under pressure." Mariah nodded. "Thank you." But then he continued, "I also wanted to apologize on behalf of my wife. Her complaint was unfounded and hurtful. It went against everything I believe in. I failed to speak up in time. I should have intervened. I didn't, and you paid the cost." Mariah absorbed his words. She sensed genuine remorse. She had not expected an apology so full. It did not erase the morning's humiliation, but it affirmed the power of acknowledging wrongdoing. "Thank you," she said softly. "I appreciate your words. They mean something." Frank leaned forward. "I also wanted to understand something," he said. "Why did you feel the need to go so far as to purchase the entire cabin? Could you not have just asked to stay and let my wife move?" He spoke with genuine curiosity. His apology had softened his tone. She considered her response carefully. "In my world," he said, "dignity is our foundation. When someone challenges that foundation, it threatens everything built on it. An apology without action often rings hollow. By purchasing the cabin, I demonstrated that my presence was non-negotiable. It was not about money alone, but about principle. I needed to prove that basic respect is not up for debate." Frank's eyes met hers. "I understand," he said, "and I'm sorry it had to come to that." He paused. "In my boardroom today, colleagues asked why I was involved in such a spectacle. I explained it was a lesson in leadership and bias. But privately, I worried I had undermined my own credibility by association." "Your credibility is intact," he said. "But more so, this experience showed us all how small actions build systems of exclusion. Your choice highlighted that. Now we see what we overlooked and can do better." Mariah nodded. "I hope that is our takeaway," he said softly, "that we examine the unseen biases that shape our decisions. Silence perpetuates injustice. Only open dialogue that values each person's humanity can dismantle those biases." Frank exhaled with relief. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for engaging rather than retaliating." She gave him a small, genuine smile. It was the moment both of them had needed, a conversation that bridged conflict and reconciliation. They spoke for another quarter hour about strategies to promote inclusive corporate policies. Frank shared his intention to propose mandatory bias training for his firm's executive team. Mariah offered to assist with curriculum development. They agreed to remain in dialogue and to invite Elaine to engage constructively with diversity initiatives. As the meeting concluded, Mariah stood and extended her hand. Frank rose and shook it firmly. "Thank you," he said again. You have my respect and my commitment." Mariah smiled. "Likewise." They parted with a nod, each carrying the responsibility of change. Mariah returned to Marcus with a lightness in her step. He looked up with concern. "How did it go?" he asked. "Better than expected," she replied. "We've agreed on next steps for corporate training and inclusive policy." The morning felt full of possibility. They reviewed the day's agenda, a quick debrief with her team, the recorded interview with Jade Morales, a strategy session for the upcoming school district launch. Mariah felt energy return to her limbs. She realized that confronting bias required more than one act of courage. It required sustained commitment, open dialogue, and the willingness to feel uncomfortable. She sent a quick message to her team. Conversation with Frank went well. Next step: bias training proposal collaboration. Then she set her phone aside. Her focus shifted to the path ahead. The price of silence had been high, but the price of speaking up had been even greater in impact. She looked out at the city beyond the windows, imagining classrooms full of eager learners. She vowed that everyone who used her platform would experience inclusion, respect, and dignity, and she would continue to model that principle, one conversation at a time. Mariah sat in the airport lounge, gazing at the departure board as it flickered updates for flights around her. The events of the past 2 days felt almost surreal. A single moment of coded prejudice at 36,000 feet had cascaded into a viral phenomenon, a tense corporate showdown, and finally a boardroom victory rooted in principle. Now, as she prepared to board her flight home, she reflected on what truly mattered. Her phone buzzed with a message from Jade Morales. The interview had aired and already garnered 500,000 views. Mariah scrolled through the social media reactions as she waited. People shared their own stories of microaggressions. Many thanked her for standing firm. Some criticized the spectacle. All of them engaged with the conversation. That dialogue was the spark that fueled change. She took a deep breath and rose, gathering her belongings. The airline staff approached with boarding passes in hand, ushering her toward Gate B12. Carla Jennings was there, standing in polished blue uniform. She smiled warmly and handed Mariah a personalized note on the airline stationery. It read, "Thank you for challenging us to be better. Safe travels." Mariah's eyes glistened as she tucked the note into her folio. "Thank you," she whispered. As she walked down the jet bridge, memories of the empty Polaris cabin washed over her. That space had become a crucible of dignity. In claiming that space, she had also reclaimed her own narrative. No longer would she shrink in spaces built for others. She would expand them. She settled into her seat in economy, plus, with a grateful nod to the attendant. It was not Polaris, but it was enough. She opened her tablet and checked her email. The term sheet from Omnibridge had arrived overnight. They valued Redrise at $150 million pre-money. The $25 million investment was poised to accelerate platform enhancements and community partnerships. She replied with a concise acceptance and a note of thanks. Then she forwarded the signed document to her legal team. Next, she opened the folder with her company's latest impact data. She had spent countless hours perfecting these metrics. Tomorrow morning she would share them with school district leaders. She rehearsed her opening line in her mind. "Good morning. Today, we renew our commitment to every child's right to learn, to belong, and to thrive." The cabin lights dimmed as the plane began its taxi. Mariah closed her eyes for a moment and let the steady hum of the engines calm her. She thought of the countless students relying on ReadRise's programs. Their futures were brighter because of this moment. She was a steward of that promise. Across the aisle, a family tucked sleeping children into blankets. A businessman studied flight maps. Everyone was on their own journey, yet their paths had intersected with hers, forging a shared narrative about respect and power. Her thoughts drifted to Elaine and Frank Bristow. Their walk of shame had given way to a conversation of accountability. She had not sought revenge, but a reckoning. Elaine's prejudice had triggered Mariah's act, but it was Frank's apology and willingness to learn that closed the loop on personal transformation. Their moment of reconciliation embodied the possibility that emerges when voices once silenced are heard. Mariah opened her notes and drafted a short reflection for her company blog. Yesterday, I reclaimed my seat. Today, we reclaim every learner's right to their own seat at the table. She paused, then added, "In the end, dignity is not a luxury. It is a necessity." She hit publish. Her phone pinged. The editor at the educational magazine she admired had requested a guest column elaborating on her experience. She smiled and began outlining the piece from cabin confrontation to boardroom resolution to collective impact. She would weave her story with actionable insights for leaders everywhere. As the Dreamliner climbed above the clouds, Mariah closed her eyes. She let her mind replay the scenes, the hush in the cabin when she stood up the first time. The click of the Centurion card against the side table, the relief in Carla's eyes, the tension in Frank's apology, and the nod of respect in the boardroom. Each moment had taught her that power paired with purpose could reshape systems. She then pictured her next project, a mentorship initiative linking ReadRise students with young professionals. She imagined bright eyes on Zoom calls, voices brimming with curiosity, hearts emboldened by seeing someone who looked like them lead fearlessly. She tapped a to-do item in her planner launch mentorship pilot Q4 measure inclusion scores. The seatbelt sign chimed off, and the flight attendants began beverage service. Mariah requested a herbal tea. As the attendant poured, Mariah glanced out at the sea of clouds illuminated by the setting sun. The horizon glowed in hues of orange and violet. A young woman in the row ahead turned and mouthed, "Thank you." Mariah offered a small wave. She didn't know the woman's story, but she understood the gratitude. It echoed the countless silent moments when someone's voice had stood for dignity. Mariah sipped her tea and allowed herself one more reflection. The cost she paid for action had been high financially, emotionally, professionally, but the cost of silence would have been higher. She had witnessed how a casual remark could shatter confidence. She had demonstrated that respectful refusal could rebuild it stronger. Her final thought, before drifting into a light doze, was that leadership was not about avoiding conflict. It was about engaging conflict with integrity, empathy, and resolve. She would carry that lesson forward into every boardroom, classroom, and conversation. When the flight began its descent into Chicago, Mariah opened her eyes. The city lights stretched below, a tapestry of human endeavor. She grabbed her bag and smoothed her dress, ready to step into the next chapter of her journey. As the plane touched down and rolled toward the gate, Mariah felt a steady confidence. Her seat on that flight had become a symbol. Now, she would ensure that symbol translated into systemic change. She stood, unbuckled, and joined the flow of passengers. She walked down the aisle with quiet pride, her head held high. In every stride she carried the lesson of dignity upheld. And as she stepped onto the jet bridge, she smiled, knowing that the most important part of her journey was just beginning. When the cabin finally emptied and the lights dimmed on Dr. Mariah Coleman's bold stand, the world below had already changed. Her act of buying out an entire first-class cabin wasn't just about a seat, it was a declaration that respect cannot be optional, and that one person's quiet resolve can ripple out to reshape conversations around race, power, and policy. We've witnessed prejudice laid bare at 36,000 feet, seen an airline crew caught between protocol and principle, and watched a boardroom transformed by integrity over profit. But the story doesn't end here. Let us carry forward the empathy she modeled, condemn discrimination wherever it hides, and champion dignity in every space we occupy. If this journey moved you, give us a like, share your thoughts below, and subscribe to our channel. Next time, we'll dive into another story that demands our attention and our action. Join us in keeping these vital conversations alive.